Hey everybody, Yoni here from Holster Mountain Tours. I'm here to show you the amazing beauty that we have here in the land of Israel. Today is going to be a little bit of a relaxed video because this evening starts the most somber day on the Jewish calendar, especially for religious Jews, specifically for religious Jews, which is the ninth day of the month of Av, the ninth of Av. The ninth of Av, according to our sages, commemorates numerous tragedies. But I'm not going to go through all the tragedies that are listed associated with this day. But suffice it to say, there are many. The most egregious of all the tragedies, the saddest of all the tragedies, is the destruction of the city of Jerusalem and the temple, which was at the heart of it, twice. Once at the hands of the Babylonians in 586 BCE, and once at the hands of the Romans in the year 70 in the Common Era. It's a somber day. There was I don't know if I mentioned a while back, but I read this amazing book called Israeli Judaism, and it was all about Jews in Israel and what they're up to in terms of religious observance, in terms of political affiliations, and all kinds of things like that. And it's a great book. And one of the things that they discussed in that book was the establishment of a day of mourning to commemorate all the tragedies that have befallen the Jewish people. The subject came up in the Israeli Knesset, in the parliament in Israel, because they were talking about Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Remembrance Day. And so one of the religious members of Knesset said, hold on a second, well, we already have Tish'a B'Av, we have the ninth of Av, and it's a day to commemorate tragedies, why don't we use that? And one of the other members of Knesset said, but that's something that happened 2,000 years ago, whereas the Holocaust is something a lot more relevant to who we are today. And the response of the religious member of Knesset was, okay, so does that mean that in 100 years from now, we could just stop celebrating stop commemorating the Holocaust on Holocaust Remembrance Day? Which is, in my opinion, a very strong question. How long do you commemorate a tragedy? How long do you make that part of your national identity? So for religious Jews, the answer is a really long time. It's a really long time because we've been commemorating this for almost 2,000 years, 1,950 years this year. But the trivia question is going to sound a little weird. The question is, how many holidays are associated with the ninth of Av? How many holidays does the Jewish religion have connected to the ninth of Av, this somber day? I'll tell you that at the end of the broadcast. But I just wanted to share a little bit about the story of the ninth of Av, a little bit of the story of what happened. Why was Jerusalem destroyed? How did that come about? Well, like I said, it happened twice. The first time was under Babylonian rule. And at that point, just before the destruction of the temple, we had autonomy. We were an independent nation, but half. We were an autonomous country known as Yehuda or Judah, or in Latin that's called Judea, but Latin wasn't spoken in these parts at that point in history. We had our own country, we had our own king, but we were subservient to other powers, other more powerful regional governments, specifically the governments of Assyria, and later on the Empire of Babylon. We were a vassal state. We had to pay tribute to those emperors in order to maintain our autonomy. By the way, I decided to choose this location today, not only because it's a nice quiet spot in Efrat, not far from my house, but also because it overlooks Jerusalem, which is right back there. I don't know how much you can see it in the video, but it's a great vantage point. For those of you who are watching who are from Efrat, this little park is a hidden gem. It's really gorgeous. It's just after the top of the Zayed. It's a little bit below the top of the Zayed Hill, and it's just a marvelous, quiet little park in Efrat. I highly recommend taking full advantage of it. It is constantly windy up here, so if you do want to come here, expect wind. That's why the camera's a little bit shaking. But anyways, we were a vassal king. We were a vassal country, rather, to all these mighty kingdoms like Assyria and Babylon. And eventually we got tired of being a vassal and we rebelled. By rebel, what that means is we just stopped paying tribute. And these mightier kings decided we're not putting up with that. And specifically, the king of Babylon came, Nebuchadnezzar, pronounced in English as Nebuchadnezzar, which is an interesting pronunciation. My favorite long Hebrew name pronounced in English is Sancheriv. Sancheriv is the ruler of Assyria that came to threaten Jerusalem a little bit before it was destroyed, a few hundred years or so before it was destroyed. In English, his name is pronounced Sennacherib. I think that Sennacherib is a funny way to pronounce his name. But we're talking about Nebuchadnezzar. Bonus trivia question: where is Nebuchadnezzar found in movie? In which movie can you find the name Nebuchadnezzar? I'll give you the answer right away. The answer is in The Matrix. The name of their ship, the name of Morpheus's ship in The Matrix is named the Nebuchadnezzar. Anyways, Nebuchadnezzar comes and he's like, I'm not having any of this insurrection from this little tiny country of Judah. And he taught us a lesson. And the lesson was utter destruction. Destroyed the city and exiled its inhabitants to Babylon. And this was a huge blow. In Tehillim, in Psalms, we talk about the reaction of the Jewish people. Oh, Tani knew the answer to the trivia question. I'm surprised. Well, I'm not that surprised. Tani's an awesome guy, and The Matrix is a great movie, so I'm not that surprised. We were devastated by the destruction of Jerusalem. In Psalms, it talks about on the rivers of Babylon we sat and we wept. We couldn't even bring ourselves to sing a song, because how can we possibly sing a song when we're on foreign land? We were depressed, and there's a good reason to be depressed. There's a way to kill people. There are a lot of ways to kill people. You can kill them by shooting them. You can kill them by stabbing them, hanging them, whatever. It's awful. You can kill a group of people. You can kill a clan if you kill enough members of the clan. That's how you kill a clan. You can wipe out a city. You can wipe out a country. How do you kill a nation? There's one way to kill a nation, historically speaking: exile. You kill a nation by exiling it. You take it out of its country, you put it in a foreign land, in a foreign culture, and you just let them assimilate away into nothing. It has happened countless times throughout world history. That's how you kill a nation. So when we were exiled by Nebuchadnezzar and taken to Babylon, that was a death sentence. As far as we were concerned, as far as we were expecting things to go, that was a death sentence. But we didn't die. Not only did we not die, we came back. 70 years later, we were allowed by the Persian king, we were allowed to come back and rebuild the temple. We were allowed to rebuild the focal point of our religion/culture. This is no small thing. It's a huge deal. And it allowed us to continue to thrive. There were a lot of people even back then that understood that Judaism was not going to survive the way that it was. Our culture was not going to survive the way that it was. And that's why at that time we had people known as the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah that started to change what our culture is all about. That it's not just going to always be dependent on sacrifice and pilgrimage. That it's going to be more based in laws and rituals that we can do privately, not necessarily only in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple. These men were absolute off-the-charts geniuses, because they were able to see what was coming. They didn't only just deal with the times as they were, they knew what was coming. After we rebuilt, we had limited autonomy. And by limited autonomy, I don't mean political. There was a brief period where we did have political autonomy under the Hashmonaim. We have the story of Hanukkah to thank for that. But primarily, we only had religious autonomy. And politically, we were subservient to whoever was in charge. And eventually, though, that was the Romans. And we were subservient to the Romans. We had religious freedom, but we were subservient to the Romans. I'm not going to go into all of the causes of the revolt in the year 66, but we started it. We started a rebellion against the Romans in the year 66, and for a while it looked like it was going okay. But eventually the Romans were able to beat us, and there's a really simple reason as to why. We couldn't get our act together. We didn't fight as a united Jewish people. There were factions. You had, on the religious level, you had the Pharisees and you had the Sadducees. You had the Sicarii, the zealots who were out to just kill whoever they felt was an enemy to them. You had factions militarily of Yochanan of Gush Chalav and Shimon, Elazar ben Shimon and Shimon bar Giora. You had all these different factions fighting against one another as much as they were fighting against the Romans. Now, on a simple practical level, everyone agrees that's one of the reasons why we lost. Everyone says it. You could look it up in Wikipedia, and they'll tell you that one of the reasons that the Jews lost is because there was as much infighting as there was fighting against the Romans. But our sages didn't only want to focus on the practical and tactical aspects of why we lost, but also on the spiritual aspect. And that same reason resonates on a spiritual level. We couldn't get along with one another. We couldn't see past our petty differences. And that's the true story of Tish'a B'Av. That's the true lesson that needs to be understood about why we're mourning on this day. The Talmud tells us that the first temple, on a spiritual level, the first temple was destroyed because of the sins of sexual immorality, idolatry, and bloodshed. And those are the worst. Those are the big three in Judaism of the absolute worst sins that can ever be committed. And yet, after the destruction, we were allowed to rebuild because apparently we repented for that. We fixed the problem. The sages go on to say that the second temple was destroyed because of baseless hatred for one another. And that temple has yet to be rebuilt. Not because of any specific political situation or anything like that, but because we haven't fixed that problem. That problem of baseless hatred is still here. It's still around. It's still palpable. And so, I'm not talking about politics. I'm not talking about whether or not it's practical to build a temple or not. That's a discussion for a different time. I'm talking specifically on a spiritual level. Even if we were all gung-ho about building the temple and ready to go and start putting bricks down and setting up the groundwork for it, it's not the time. In 1967, when the Israeli army recaptured the Temple Mount, and very famously, Matagor, as I said on this video series, Matagor got on his radio and he said, the Temple Mount is in our hands. Rabbi Shlomo Goren, when people asked Rabbi Shlomo Goren, so are we going to knock down the domes and start building the temple? He said, no, it's not time. If we did any damage, he said, to these domes on the Temple Mount, then our next job would be going around the world and collecting money to rebuild them, because it's not the time. We are not ready for it. And that's actually a concept that goes back all the way to the Exodus from Egypt. I always had a question about why God had Moses ask Pharaoh for a 3-day furlough. Seems weird. If you look in the Bible, if you look in Exodus, Moses does not show up right at the outset like he does in the movie The Ten Commandments and say, let my people go. He actually says, let my people go for 3 days. Why would he do that? And God knows, by the way, God tells Moses, you're going to ask Pharaoh for 3 days and Pharaoh's going to turn you down cold. And then I'm going to hit him with all the plagues and everything. So if he knows that, why ask for 3 days? Why not just say, I'm taking these people and we're getting out? Why not just do that? And the best answer I've heard, I've never heard a really good answer, but the best one that I've heard is that we, the Jewish people, we were not ready for it. We weren't ready to hear we're leaving forever. We weren't ready for it. We needed time to digest the concept of freedom. We were too inured in our slave mentality. Same thing is true today. We're not ready. We're not ready for the house of God to dwell amongst us. Just the other day, Seth Rogen, very funny actor, made a couple of comments about his newfound understanding about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And basically his statement was something to the effect of that he was always told that Israel was always in the right and the Palestinians are always in the wrong. And now he understands that it's not so cut and dry. It's a little bit more nuanced than that. Maybe Israel's not 100% right. Maybe the Palestinians are not 100% wrong. And my Facebook news feed is just filled with a lot of people who are so anti-Seth Rogen, just yelling at him, you're a fake Jew and you're terrible. Guys, he expressed a different opinion. It's not like he's Nietzsche coming out and saying that God is dead. He's a comedian who said that maybe there's more to the story than he thought. I'm not saying that he's right. I'm not saying I agree with him. All I'm saying is that you're allowed to disagree with someone without calling him a fake Jew. You're allowed to disagree with someone without vilifying them, without saying that they're no longer a part of the Jewish people. I mean, who are we to decide who is and who is not worthy of being in the Jewish people? It's a big responsibility. I don't know if I would want that responsibility, quite frankly. But it's an academic question because I don't think I have the responsibility. I don't think any of us have that ability to tell who is and who is not allowed to be a part of the Jewish people. We're a nation. Just because you don't like someone in your nation doesn't mean they're not part of your nation anymore. And that's something that's a specific example of just something that is alive and well today. That means we're not ready. We're not ready. There's that famous old story of why God chose the Temple Mount as the spot where he wanted to put his house. The story goes that there were two brothers, each living on either side of Mount Moriah. One brother was wealthy, but he didn't have a family. He was single. The other brother was poor, and he had a wife and children. And the two of them were farmers. Each had their wheat fields. Well, he also said, Nathan says he also said religion is silly. I'm assuming you're talking about Seth Rogen said that religion is silly. Okay. Listen, we twirl chickens around our heads. Sometimes religion does get silly. We wave palm fronds and citrons. We do silly things. I'm not saying they're not important silly things, but we do get silly sometimes. Anyways, the two brothers, one on one side, rich and single, one on the other side, poor and married with family. And the rich guy says one night, you know what, my brother, he's got a wife and kids to feed. I'm gonna give him some of my extra wheat. I don't need it. I'm rich enough. I'm gonna help him out. So he sneaks some wheat over to his brother's house after they all harvested. The other brother's on the other side of the mountain. He says, you know what? I've got such a full life with my wife and my children. My brother, he's still single. You know, he's wealthy, but he still hasn't gotten married. Maybe he needs to be a little bit more wealthy to be a better prospect. So I'm going to give him some of my wheat. I'm okay. It doesn't matter if I don't have so much. I've got a full life without all this wheat. And so he takes some of his wheat and gives it to his brother. And the next morning they wake up and they have the same amount of wheat. So they keep doing it. And then one night they actually were going over the mountain and they saw one another with the sheaves of wheat on their backs. And they realized that each brother was helping the other one out. And they dropped their sheaves of wheat and they fell into one another in an embrace. And God said, this is where I want my house to be. This is where I want my house to be. This is the place of love that I want to build my house. And I don't know that we're there. I don't know that we're in the same spot. It seems that God's not saying, I want to build my house there. I don't hear him saying that anymore. And to me, that's the real tragedy of Tish'a B'Av. Yes, it is tragic that Jerusalem was destroyed 1,950 years ago. It's tragic. I'm not trying to belittle that in the slightest bit. It is. But I think it's more tragic that God still doesn't want to live with us. It's a harsh truth to accept, but I feel that is the truth. And really, it's a more relatable truth. Show of hands. How many people remember the temple? Remember the Beit HaMikdash? I'm going to put my hand down because I don't. It was 1,950 years ago. It's a long time. I don't remember it. I do remember Jew hatred. Jew on Jew hatred. I remember that. It's happening now. I read this fantastic blog years ago by this girl named Aviva Wolf. I believe that's no longer her last name, but she wrote this fantastic blog about Tish'a B'Av, and basically she said we as a society, we love to hate. We love it. We hate. We love it. We hate when the barista gets our coffee order wrong. We hate when some idiot corners us in a conversation about their major in college and the professor that they can't stand. We hate Biden. We hate Trump. We hate what else did she say? She didn't say Biden and Trump because it was written a while ago. She said Obama and Romney. But the idea is we hate Obama. We hate Biden. We hate Trump. We hate Taylor Swift's ex-boyfriends. We hate Taylor Swift. We hate Justin Bieber. We hate. Why do we hate so much? And she said, and I think she's right, it feels good to hate. It feels powerful to hate. When you hate someone, you're saying, I'm better than you. Whatever that aspect of you that I hate, that's wrong and I'm right. And it feels good. That superiority feels good. But it's destructive. It's a destructive quality within us. And we should stop. We really should stop. I'm not saying anything grand. I'm not coming up with any grand truth here, but we should stop. And this is something that Aviva said in her blog. It was genius. She said, that's the beauty of Tish'a B'Av, is that you don't have to take upon anything on yourself. You don't have to announce anything to your family at a holiday dinner, or you don't have to come out as loving. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to spread love necessarily. You just have to stop hating. You just have to stop hating. She wrote that blog years ago. Unfortunately, it's gone. I can't find it anywhere on the internet. I have an excerpt of it at home that I like reading sometimes, but I don't have the whole thing. And it's a powerful concept. Just stop hating. No one's saying you have to love everybody. Just stop hating. I tried doing a video series over the 3 weeks, and I failed miserably. I wanted to do a video series. I had mentioned it on this series that I wanted to do another series on my Instagram account called 3 Weeks of Rebuilding, where I was going to pick a different person each day and talk about what I liked about them, even though I don't agree with them politically. I did one, but I wasn't able to keep it up. I've been a lot busier in unemployment than I thought I would be. Turns out there are still people who do want to see the country. So you know who you are. Thank you very much. But I think it's a great concept. This idea that we should seek out those people with whom we disagree, politically, religiously, culturally. Just find these people that we disagree with and talk to them and see why do I disagree with you. Right now is actually a great opportunity. There are wonderful opportunities, especially here in Israel. Fantastic opportunities to do that. the people with whom you disagree are most likely gathering together on a nightly basis, because there are protests and counter protests going on in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, mostly in Jerusalem, right outside the prime minister's residence. So if you agree with the protesters, go down there, find the counter protest, and talk to some of the counter protesters. See why they're opposing the protests. Talk to them. See if you can find out what makes them tick. And if you disagree with the protests, go down to the protest. Start talking to people. Despite what I've read in the media, from what I hear from people who live nearby, from people who have actually been to the protests, they're quite peaceful, and the people who are there are quite friendly and willing to engage in debate. We can do this. We can actually talk with one another and see why we disagree. Maybe we can, share our opinions and share our views and influence them, and maybe their views will influence us. I don't know. Go to the protests, go to the counter protests. We can talk. We can come together as a nation. These are things that we can do. These are concrete things that we can do. We can bring our sheaf of wheat to our brother on the other side of the mountain. Yeah, it's work. It's not easy. You gotta put it on your back. You gotta climb the mountain. It's annoying, but we can do it. This is something that we can do on Tish'a B'Av. It's actually something more productive, in my opinion, than going to services and sitting on the floor and listening to the Book of Lamentations. I have a problem listening to the Book of Lamentations. I don't have a problem learning it. I think it's a fantastic book. There are a lot of wonderful lessons that can be learned from it. But I shared an article on my Facebook page. If you want to go through not the Holster Mountain Tours page, but my personal Facebook page, I shared in a blog post from 4 years ago by Rabbi Nathan Lopez Cardozo. And he writes pretty much what I'm thinking, that it's hard to look at that city over there, which at night it glows like a beautiful candelabra. You can drive through the city of Jerusalem and you pass by museums and theaters and hotels, which unfortunately aren't doing so well right now. But you can go by parks and water fountains and historic sites. It's gorgeous. It's a beautiful city. To sit down tonight and say how our city lies desolate, I have a hard time with that. I have a hard time facing God with that claim. As a religious Jew, I believe that the war in 1967 was an out-and-out miracle. This was a gift from God himself, saying, here you go, here's the old city of Jerusalem. You can now unify the city of Jerusalem. And we've built so much. So for us to say, the city is so desolate, there's nothing here, to me that is a lack of, what's the word I'm looking for? Not consideration. It's a lack of gratitude. It shows ingratitude, in my opinion, to God, saying, yeah, thanks for what you gave me, but it's still nothing. To me, that sounds harsh. And I'm uncomfortable with that. I'd rather take the steps that I was just talking about. I'd rather engage with my fellow Jew and see what I can do to spiritually rebuild, rather than complain about what we haven't physically rebuilt. I'm not saying that I don't want the temple. Obviously, it would be fantastic. As it says in Isaiah, Ki beiti beit tefillah yikreh lechol ha'amim, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations. It's fantastic. It's an amazing idea. It really is. And I would love to see that in my lifetime. But I think it's more important that we be ready for it, that we be ready for God to say, all right, I'm ready to be with you. I'm ready to live among you. I'm ready to live within you. To me, that's far more important than the actual structure. And in order to do that, we got to get ready. We have to improve ourselves. We have to fix what's wrong. And what's wrong is we can't get past each other's differences. I know that was a little heavy. I'm not a preacher. I'm a tour guide. My job is to just show you what's beautiful about this country. But I also point out what's wrong sometimes. That's the kind of tour that I give. A lot of times you'll have tour guides who will just repeat the company line, and they'll give you the stories that you know, even though they're not real, they're not accurate. Like for example, some tour guides will tell you that there's a flock of birds going by. Sorry, I got distracted. Some tour guides will tell you that Israel has a lot of cats because the British brought them in to get rid of the rats. Sounds great. Not true. There were cats here before the British showed up, and there are still rats here. So that's not true. A lot of people will continue to say. I also sometimes, just for the sake of ease, I say that Herod built the Western Wall. Turns out he didn't. He was dead by the time they started construction on the Western Wall. So he didn't build it. He most likely designed it. Not taking that away from his megalomaniacal lunatic credit. So he definitely designed it, but he didn't build it. It wasn't built in his lifetime. But that's the kind of tour guide I am. So when it comes to days like Tish'a B'Av, I'll tell you what the tragedy is. Yes, it's a tragedy that Jerusalem was destroyed starting tonight, 1,950 years ago. It's a tragedy. But I'm also going to point out that there's a bigger tragedy still ongoing, which is the fact that the Jewish people cannot get along with each other on a personal level because of political differences. I mean, the differences between the different factions at the time of the Roman revolt, they were legitimate. They had legitimate reasons for not liking one another. But it doesn't matter. You set those aside. Same thing happened, by the way. I keep on going on tangents. But the same thing happened, by the way, in the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising during the Holocaust. During the Holocaust, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which is one of the most famous uprisings against the Nazis, there were two factions of Jews fighting the Nazis separately because they couldn't get along with one another. That's crazy. That's crazy. So when I hear people today talking of, planning on going to synagogue and crying over the destruction of the temple, over the destruction of Jerusalem, and at the same time, in almost the same breath, engaging in the kind of divisiveness and hatred that is the cause of the destruction, to me that smacks of such strong hypocrisy. It's like when I complain that I can't lose weight as I'm eating candy bars. Of course I can't lose weight. I'm eating candy bars. So you're going to go and cry over the destruction of Jerusalem while you're hating other Jews? Okay. If you don't see the hypocrisy in that, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know how to address it if you can't see the hypocrisy in that. But I think that most of my viewers can see the hypocrisy in it, and you understand that there is a remedy. It's hard. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but we can do it. We can handle it. We can swallow our pride. We can get over our differences, and we can come together and we can fix what's wrong. And that's when we'll have holidays instead of fast days, which brings me back to the trivia question. How many holidays are associated with the 9th of Av? Right now, the answer is 0. But according to our prophet, Zechariah, if I'm not mistaken, Zechariah in English, he says that in the end days, meaning whenever things get much better, these sad days, these fast days of the 9th of Av, the 17th of Tammuz, the 10th of Tevet, and the 3rd of Tishrei, all of those sad days will become holidays. They'll become days of gladness and joy. So the trivia question is a little bit of a trick question this time. How many holidays are associated with the 9th of Av? The answer is right now 0. But eventually, hopefully soon, there will be 4. 4 holidays associated with the destruction of the temple. That sounds weird, but I'm in. I'm in. This was a little bit of a laid-back episode of The Stories Right Outside Your Door. I want to thank everybody for watching. I appreciate it. Join me again next week. By the way, just to clarify something, because I've gotten this from people who haven't seen the show and don't get it. A lot of people think that when I wear this shirt that I went to Greendale Community College. I did not go to Greendale Community College. If you know where I got what this T-shirt is referring to, leave that in the comments. I'm not even going to answer that one. I'm a big fan of the concept of Hamevin Yavin. If you get it, you get it. If you don't get it, that's okay. You could think that I went to community college. I won't be offended if you think that I did. And if I did go to a community college, I would definitely choose Greendale because it looks awesome. Anyways, like I was saying, thank you very much for watching. Tune in next week for a much more exciting and a love-filled episode of The Story Is Right Outside Your Door. Why is it love-filled? I know you know the answer, Daniela, but I'm not answering it. You can just write it in the comments. Yeah, if you know why the next week's episode is going to be love-filled, that's great. If you don't know why, take a look at your calendar. And if you're still stumped after looking at your calendar, I'll explain it to you next week. For those of you who are fasting, for those of you who are going to join me in mourning the destruction of Jerusalem and of the fabric of the culture of the Jewish people, I wish you all an easy and meaningful fast. For those of you who are not going to be joining in the fasting in the morning, just wanted to tell you that I love you, and I'll see you all next week. Thanks a lot.